Long before Rome's legions became the iron fist of the ancient world, their strength began with the tools they carried into battle. Every conquest, every victory, every empire-shaping moment started with the weapons in the hands of ordinary soldiers. Their arsenal wasn't a random collection of gear. It was a system, carefully engineered, brutally practical, designed to turn disciplined men into an unstoppable wall of advancing steel. A Roman battle usually opened with a sound that chilled the blood of anyone standing across from them. Before swords clashed and shields smashed together, before the choking crush of close combat, came a dark swarm of spears whistling through the sky. For thousands of Rome's enemies, this was their first glimpse of Roman fury. The pilum, a weapon that seemed simple at a glance but carried a frightening intelligence in its design. The pilum looked like a heavy throwing spear, but it was crafted with purpose. Roughly 2 meters long and weighted between 2 and 5 kilograms, it carried a sharp, hardened tip forged to punch through wood and iron. That point was fixed to a long, narrow iron shank, thin, almost delicate compared to the heavy wooden shaft behind it. Yet this was the secret of the weapon. That slim iron shaft was intentionally made to bend upon impact. Rome didn't want a spear that could be used again. They wanted a spear that ruined whatever it struck. Legionaries hurled these weapons in coordinated volleys when they were about 15 to 30 meters from the enemy line. The effect was devastating. When the pilum hit a shield, its hardened tip bit deep, and the soft shank behind it bent or snapped the moment the force drove through. Enemies could not pull it free. They could not throw it back. Instead, they found themselves burdened with a shield suddenly weighted down by a long, bent spear dragging toward the ground. A soldier had only 2 bad options: drop his shield and fight exposed, or keep it and stumble helplessly as the Romans closed in. To armies like the Gauls, whose wide shields were their main protection, this was disaster. Men threw their shields aside. Formations broke. Lines that moments before had looked solid began to waver as Roman soldiers advanced behind a storm of falling iron. But Rome wasn't finished. Before the shock of the pilum's impact faded, another force slammed forward, the curved, towering wall of scutum shields. Each shield was held tight, locked to the next, forming a moving fortress of layered wood and iron. It wasn't a charge filled with wild screams. It was slow, controlled, and terrifying. Soldiers behind the scutum didn't sprint, they pressed. They leaned. They advanced like a single living machine that swallowed ground and crushed resistance. In that cramped space between shields and panicked enemies, the gladius came alive. Short, fast, and razor-sharp, the Roman sword turned close combat into a methodical slaughter. Where other warriors swung great arcs with long blades, Roman soldiers thrust, quick jabs from behind their shields aimed at the stomach, ribs, or throat. Every movement was small and efficient. Every thrust cost little energy. Every wound was meant to end a fight instantly. This combination, the bending pilum, the advancing wall of scutum, and the killing precision of the gladius, was not an accident. It was a system. Each weapon amplified the others. Each tool turned the Roman legionary into a cog in a perfectly timed engine of war. This was how Rome expanded, city by city, battlefield by battlefield, until its power touched 3 continents. Their victory didn't begin with the empire. It began with the arsenal carried by every man in the line. Before a Roman soldier ever reached striking distance with his sword, the pilum had already begun its work. To many warriors standing opposite a legion, the opening of battle felt less like the start of a fight and more like the arrival of a storm. Men would grip their shields, staring across a field where the Roman line marched in silence, shields steady, helmets gleaming. There were no shouts, no scattered movement, no wild gestures, just a quiet, disciplined advance. That silence made the moment the pila left Roman hands even more terrifying. Each legionary carried 1 or 2 of these heavy spears during the Republic, a lighter one for distance and a heavier one for brute impact. After the Marian reforms, their equipment became uniform, but the effect remained the same. When the order came, thousands of arms swept back in unison. Then came the release. In the space of a heartbeat, the pale sky filled with dark iron as the spears arced forward in a deadly wave. The engineering behind the pilum made that moment far more destructive than it appeared. The weapon's iron shank, long and thin, drove all the spear's weight into a single sharp point. Even well-built shields stood little chance against such focused force. The hardened tip punched straight through wood and leather, and sometimes deep enough to strike the man holding it. But the real brilliance happened the moment the impact ended. The softer metal of the shank bent under its own weight. A spear that had flown straight and true now dangled like a crooked branch from the enemy's shield. Those who survived the initial hit found their defenses turned into anchors. Soldiers fumbled, stumbled, and cursed as they tried to keep formation while dragging shields tangled with bent shafts nearly as tall as themselves. Some tore the spears out, only to realize their shields were split or unusable. Others abandoned their shields entirely, left bare-armed just as the Roman line closed the distance. Even armies known for bravery, the Celts, the Gauls, the Iberians, felt their confidence drain in the face of a weapon that made entire units feel clumsy and exposed. The psychological blow was immense. In the instant before the Roman charge, the battlefield felt like chaos itself. Pila slammed into shields with thuds that echoed across the field. Men shouted warnings, stumbled over fallen spears, and tried desperately to close the gaps forming in their line. Officers struggled to restore order while watching their best warriors discard their primary defense. And above all that confusion, the Roman advance continued, not fast, but steady, purposeful, like a tide that had already decided where it meant to break. The brilliance of the pilum was never just about killing. It was about creating weakness, cracking the enemy's line, filling the air with fear. By the time the Romans reached their foes, those foes were already struggling, already disorganized, already doubting their chances. The pilum made sure of that. And once the distance between the two armies vanished, and shields collided with a sound like thunder rolling across the ground, the Romans shifted into the next phase of their deadly system. It was in that furious press of bodies and shields, when formations buckled and men grappled in tight spaces, that the gladius revealed why Rome had chosen such a small, unimpressive blade. The pilum opened the door. The gladius walked through it. If the pilum was Rome's opening strike, the gladius was the quiet, clinical finisher. No weapon is more tied to the image of a Roman soldier than this short, efficient blade. Yet to anyone unfamiliar with Rome's way of war, it might have looked almost insignificant. At barely half a meter long, it lacked the intimidating reach of the long swords favored by many of Rome's enemies. But the gladius wasn't meant to impress. It was meant to kill, and in the Roman style of fighting, it was perfect. Ironically, the weapon wasn't even Roman in origin. It was born in the fierce tribal wars of the Iberian Peninsula. Rome encountered it during the Punic Wars, saw its brutal effectiveness in close combat, and did what Rome did best. They adopted it, refined it, and turned it into a cornerstone of their military system. Skilled blacksmiths folded hard steel for the edges and left a softer core inside the blade, giving it both sharpness and resilience. It could bend under pressure without shattering, a vital trait when thousands of men clashed in tight formations. Though double-edged and fully capable of slashing, the gladius was designed for one primary purpose: thrusting. Roman commanders understood something many armies ignored. In the cramped chaos of battle, wide swings wasted energy and opened a fighter to attacks. A slash could be dramatic, but it was easy to block or halt with armor. A thrust, however, was fast, efficient, and lethal. A few inches was all a legionary needed to strike deep, into the stomach, under the ribs, through the throat. This method of fighting fit perfectly with the formation they mastered. As the Romans stepped forward behind their great scutum shields, each soldier became part of a unified line. There was no need for dramatic movements. A legionary would shove with the heavy boss of his shield, knocking an enemy off balance for the briefest moment. In that instant, a quick jab of the gladius slipped from behind the scutum, disappearing into exposed flesh. Then the soldier stepped forward again, shield still locked with his comrades, ready for another strike. When thousands did this in perfect rhythm, the battle stopped looking like a chaotic brawl and became something far colder, a methodical advance over the fallen. Every few seconds, another man at the front of Rome's line dropped to the ground. Enemies staggered backward, only to be crushed by the weight of soldiers behind them. Panic spread, then broke into full collapse. The gladius itself evolved over time. Early versions had a leaf-shaped blade, while later types, like the Pompey model, adopted straighter edges better suited for thrusting in formation. Soldiers wore it high on the right side of the belt, keeping it clear of the large scutum held in the left hand. This small detail mattered. In the dense crush of combat, even a few inches of movement saved time, and saving time saved lives. With the gladius in hand, the Roman front line became a relentless grinder. Their technique didn't rely on strength, flair, or individual heroics. It relied on discipline. Each soldier protected the man next to him. Each step forward tightened the noose around their enemy. Each thrust added to the mounting dread facing any army that dared stand against them. But even the gladius, as deadly as it was, depended on something larger, the towering shield that guarded the soldier's body and allowed him to fight with such confidence. Without the scutum, the gladius was simply a short sword. With the scutum, it became the heart of Rome's killing machine. A Roman soldier carried many weapons, but none shaped his survival, or his style of fighting, more than the scutum. Massive, curved, and deceptively light, this shield wasn't just a slab of protection. It was the backbone of Rome's entire battlefield strategy. Without it, the gladius lost its advantage. Without it, Roman formations lost their strength. With it, the legions became nearly immovable. The scutum towered over most other shields of the ancient world. Standing roughly 4 feet tall and almost 3 feet wide, it curved like a protective shell around the soldier's body. Its shape wasn't a cosmetic choice. That curve allowed arrows, slingstones, and even sword blows to glance off instead of striking with full force. From a distance, the shield looked like a single slab of wood, but it was far more sophisticated than that. It was built from multiple thin layers of wood strips, each glued with its grain set at a different angle. This composite construction, similar to modern plywood, gave it remarkable strength without weighing a soldier down. The exterior was wrapped in canvas and leather to keep it durable against weather and wear. Along the edges, metal binding protected it from splitting under the stress of battle. But the part that defined the shield's personality was the iron boss at its center, the umbo. More than a handguard, it was a weapon in its own right. In the crush of combat, a legionary could slam it forward like a punch, staggering an opponent or knocking aside a weapon. Many enemies learned too late that the scutum didn't just block attacks, it delivered them. The protection offered by this shield was immense. When held properly, it covered a soldier from shoulders to shins. When legionaries stood shoulder to shoulder, their shields overlapped to create a continuous wall. This wasn't a metaphor or poetic flourish, it was a real, tangible barrier, one that enemies had to physically break before ever reaching the men behind it. The historian Polybius once wrote that the sheer size of the Roman shield allowed soldiers to lean into their foes, using their weight to push back enemy lines. In those moments, the scutum wasn't just armor, it was a battering ram. But the scutum's most iconic use came in the form of the testudo, the tortoise. During sieges or when facing heavy missile fire, soldiers packed tightly together. The front rank held their shields upright, the ranks behind lifted theirs overhead, and those on the sides angled theirs outward. From above, it looked like overlapping tiles on a roof. From the ground, it looked like an armored box creeping forward across the battlefield. Ancient writers claimed the formation was so strong that even a chariot could drive over it without breaking through. Whether that was exaggeration or not, the testudo showcased Rome's discipline at its highest level. Perfect timing, unwavering trust, and physical strength all working together to create something no other army consistently replicated. This combination of protection and offensive capability made the scutum the silent hero of Roman warfare. It allowed soldiers to fight with confidence, knowing they were shielded from most projectiles and blows. It created the tight formations that held the line against overwhelming numbers. And it served as the platform from which the gladius could strike with deadly precision. Yet the scutum was only one part of a larger system. On the soldier's belt hung the pugio, a small but reliable dagger used for both combat and daily tasks. On his body, layers of armor, whether the flexible chainmail of the hamata or the iconic segmented plates of the larica segmentata, kept him safe in the thick of battle. On his head, the helmet's flared neck guard and cheek plates turned deadly blows aside with remarkable efficiency. Each piece of equipment supported the others. Each tool gave the soldier another ounce of confidence. Layer by layer, the Roman legionary became a walking fortress, part engineer, part warrior, part machine. But even this personal arsenal was only one part of Rome's dominance. When enemy walls needed to fall, when armies needed to be broken from afar, the Romans brought something far more powerful than any individual weapon. The engineers stepped forward, and with them came the great engines of war. The strength of the Roman legion didn't end with the soldier standing in the front line. When Rome faced towering city walls or vast armies dug into strong positions, it called upon a different kind of warrior, the engineer. These men wielded ropes, pulleys, and timber instead of swords, yet their creations could shatter stone, scatter armies, and crush resistance long before the infantry arrived. Their machines were the thunder that announced Rome's arrival. One of the most versatile among these siege engines was the ballista. From a distance, it resembled a giant crossbow, but the power behind it came from twisted bundles of animal sinew. These torsion springs stored enormous force when the arms were pulled back. With a single release, the ballista could hurl iron-tipped bolts or heavy stones with terrifying speed. Large versions reduced walls to rubble, while smaller ones acted as battlefield sharpshooters. Soldiers could reposition them with relative ease, allowing Roman commanders to direct precision fire wherever it was needed most. Alongside the ballista stood its deadlier, more focused cousin, the Scorpio. Narrower and more compact, this machine was the ancient world's equivalent of a sniper weapon. Its bolts could pierce armor, shields, or even multiple men in a single shot. Ancient writers noted that each legion carried dozens of these devices, giving Roman forces a long-range sting that few armies could match. Julius Caesar himself recorded moments when a single Scorpio broke the courage of defenders simply by picking off anyone who dared show their face above a wall. But when the Romans needed pure devastation, they brought forth the onager, the wild kick of Rome's artillery. Its construction was simple, but its power immense. A massive vertical arm, held by twisted ropes, snapped forward when released, striking a frame that whipped a sling upward. The result was a thundering launch that sent enormous stones soaring high into the sky. These projectiles slammed down on walls, towers, and buildings with brutal force. The onager wasn't designed for accuracy. It was designed to terrify. Its stones smashed roofs, flattened homes, and turned sturdy fortifications into crumbling dust. Often, the psychological shock alone pushed cities toward surrender. Together, these machines showcased the other half of Rome's military genius, the part that didn't rely solely on courage or discipline, but on calculation, engineering, and relentless innovation. Wherever the legions marched, their artillery followed, rolling forward on carts or assembled on site from stacks of timber and sinew. No fortress felt secure once Roman engineers set to work. All of these tools, from the smallest dagger on a soldier's belt to the towering catapults that reshaped entire cities, formed a single unified system. Rome didn't depend on one weapon, one tactic, or one formation. Victory came from the perfect coordination of every element. The pilum shattered shields and morale before the first clash. The scutum created an advancing wall that smothered chaos and protected the line. The gladius finished the fight with ruthless efficiency. And behind it all, the siege engine struck fear into the hearts of defenders long before Rome's soldiers reached their gates. No piece of equipment on its own built the Roman Empire. But together, they created a war machine unmatched for centuries. It wasn't strength alone that carried Rome across continents. It was discipline, design, and a deep understanding of how every weapon could support the next. Their arsenal didn't just win battles. It carved out a civilization that shaped the world that followed.